Let's rewind. Long before America was America, this land was home to millions. The first people crossed from Asia over Beringia, spreading across the continent and building diverse, complex societies. There wasn't just one Native American group, there were hundreds, each with its own language, culture, and way of life. The Haudenosaunee in the northeast built longhouses and formed powerful alliances. The Lakota and Cheyenne thrived on the plains, deeply connected to the buffalo. In the southwest, the ancestral Puebloans built cliff dwellings. In the Mississippi Valley, Cahokia was a bustling city with massive earthen mounds. These societies developed agriculture, government, and trade networks that spanned the continent. The land was more than a home. It was sacred, a source of life, and central to their identity. Ownership wasn't about property lines. It was about stewardship and responsibility to future generations. Every mountain, river, and forest had meaning and purpose. Selling land was unthinkable, like selling the sky. This deep connection to the land shaped every aspect of indigenous life. It's crucial to understand this worldview because everything that followed was built on this foundation, but, across the ocean, a storm was gathering. Suddenly, strange ships appeared on the horizon. Columbus in 1492, lost but certain he'd found India. For indigenous peoples, this was the start of a world-changing collision. Early encounters were a mix of curiosity and trade, but things quickly turned deadly. Europeans brought diseases like smallpox and measles, wiping out up to 90% of the native population. Beyond disease, there was a clash of values. Europeans saw land as property to be owned and exploited, while indigenous peoples saw it as communal and sacred. This fundamental misunderstanding fueled centuries of conflict. Colonists drew borders over already inhabited lands, built forts, and pushed westward for gold and land. For native nations, this was an invasion. Spiritual sites desecrated, hunting grounds destroyed, communities displaced. The newcomers weren't just visiting, they were here to stay. The fight for the land had begun, and it would only intensify. As the U.S. expanded, it turned to treaties, formal agreements with native nations promising peace and protection. Hundreds were signed, but forever often lasted only until settlers wanted more land. Treaties were negotiated under pressure, often with the threat of force. Indigenous leaders signed, hoping to secure a future for their people, but promises were routinely broken. Gold discoveries on native land made treaties worthless overnight. The government legalized land grabs with policies like the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This act gave the president power to negotiate the removal of tribes east of the Mississippi, negotiation in name only. Forced relocation became official policy. The government wanted land for white settlement and cotton plantations, no matter the cost. This set the stage for one of the darkest chapters in American history. The Trail of Tears was about to begin. Broken promises became a way of life. The cycle of dispossession seemed endless, and the consequences would be devastating. The Indian Removal Act led to the forced relocation of the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole. These nations had adopted many aspects of American culture, even winning a Supreme Court case to defend their land. President Andrew Jackson ignored the ruling and ordered their removal anyway. The Choctaw were the first. Forced to march hundreds of miles with little food or shelter, thousands died. The Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole suffered similar fates. The Cherokees' removal in 1838 was the most infamous. Families were rounded up at gunpoint, marched over 1,200 miles, and a quarter died along the way. The Trail of Tears was a humanitarian disaster, thousands buried in unmarked graves. The tribes were promised new land in the West, forever, but that promise was soon broken too. The Trail of Tears wasn't the end, just one brutal chapter in a long struggle for survival. It was the physical result of broken treaties and greed. The pain and loss echoed through generations, but indigenous nations endured. Their fight for land and sovereignty continued. Indigenous nations didn't give up. They resisted, sometimes with arms, sometimes with spirit. The Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 was a rare victory. Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors defeated Custer's cavalry. But the U.S. responded with overwhelming force, seizing the Black Hills and confining tribes to reservations. The era of Indian wars ended not with peace, but with subjugation. Resistance took spiritual forms too, like the Ghost Dance, a movement of hope for a return to lost ways. U.S. authorities saw it as a threat, leading to tragedy at Wounded Knee in 1890. Soldiers massacred nearly 300 Lakota men, women and children. Wounded Knee marked the brutal end of the Indian Wars, but it became a symbol, a place where the fight for rights would be reborn. The struggle shifted from battlefields to reservations, courts, and protests. The spirit of resistance survived. Wounded Knee's legacy would inspire new generations. The story was far from over. Through the 20th century, indigenous peoples faced forced assimilation and loss of sovereignty. By the 1960s and 70s, a new wave of activism rose. Groups like AIM demanded self-determination and treaty rights. In 1973, activists occupied Wounded Knee, drawing national attention to ongoing injustices. The fight for land shifted to courts, media, and social media. In 2016, the #NoDAPL movement at Standing Rock protested the Dakota Access Pipeline, uniting thousands to protect water and sacred sites. It was the largest Native gathering in a century, broadcast live to the world. Though the pipeline was built, the movement raised global awareness of indigenous rights and environmental justice. Today, battles continue, from pipelines to sacred sites and land reclamation. The struggle is ongoing, but so is the resilience. Indigenous peoples are still here, still fighting. Their voices are stronger than ever. Why does this history matter? Because it's not just indigenous history, it's American history. The nation's wealth was built on land taken from its first peoples. Understanding this journey is essential to understanding America today. For indigenous peoples, land is identity, culture, and survival. Destroying sacred sites or polluting water isn't just environmental harm, it's cultural destruction. The struggles for land and rights are about justice, survival, and respect. Indigenous stewardship offers vital lessons for a world facing climate crisis. The poverty and challenges on many reservations are the legacy of broken promises and dispossession. Recognizing this history is the first step toward justice and reconciliation. It means honoring treaties, respecting sovereignty, and giving indigenous peoples a real voice. Despite centuries of trauma, indigenous cultures endure. Languages, traditions, and nations are being revitalized. The story of indigenous land rights is one of resilience and hope. The land remembers, and so should we.